Thank you. If we could, Beth, if you don't mind pulling up the slide deck, please. So part 4, school start times. So let's kind of begin with the why we're even considering new start times, and why we're having this conversation. This is research about start times that's been almost 20 years. So it's nothing new about looking at start times. So most U.S. middle and high schools start the school day too early. So 5 out of 6 U.S. middle and high schools start the school day before 8:30 a.m. The American Academy of Pediatrics has recommended that middle and high schools should aim to start no earlier than 8:30 a.m. to enable students to get adequate sleep. Teens on average need at least 8 hours of sleep per night. Younger students on average need at least 9 hours of sleep per night. So 2 out of 3 U.S. high school students sleep less than 8 hours on school nights. Adolescents, and by adolescents, according to the World Health Organization, adolescents are those that are 10 and older, and the American Academy of Pediatrics classifies adolescents as those that are 11 and older. So adolescents who do not get enough sleep are more likely to be overweight, not get enough physical activity, suffer from depressive symptoms, engage in unhealthy risk behaviors such as drinking alcohol, smoking tobacco, and using illicit drugs, and perform poorly in school. There's also more information on the CDC and AAP website. Next slide, please. So Bloomfield for the strategic plan, looking at 2019 to 2023. Goal area number 1, Bloomfield Hills Schools will provide an educational experience where all learners are empowered to reach their unique potential, reflecting the BHS portrait of a learner. Objective 2, time allocation. Optimizing our use of time to best support the learning needs of students and staff. Of special note, during the strategic planning process, the committee that drafted and outlined Objective 2 did so with secondary start times in mind, particularly expressing interest in delaying the beginning of the school day for high school students. Next slide, please. Community Task Force, BHS start times. After the strategic planning process was completed, President Paul Cullen of the Board of Education launched a community task force to help explore and investigate current research and public interest. The task force was made up of approximately 25 community members that included high school students, parents of elementary, middle school, and high school age students, teachers, administrators, and medical professionals. Feedback provided, the task force expressed for the district to explore options to delay the start time at the high school level in a manner that would minimize the impact at both the elementary and middle school levels. Next slide, please. Looking at this year's Board of Education and Superintendent goals. Board of Education and District Goal number 7, the superintendent will present proposed new start times for the Board of Education to select for BHS for the 2021-22 school year. Superintendent goal number 6, by May of 2021, the superintendent will present various proposed new start times for Bloomfield Hills Schools and Bloomfield Hills Schools 2021-2022 start times report that was available April 15th of 2021. Next slide, please. So again, we're looking at the recommendation from the American Academy of Pediatrics. It's their policy statement, school start times for adolescents. Again, how are we qualifying those that are, or classifying those that are adolescents? According to the World Health Organization, those 10 and older, and for the American Academy of Pediatrics, adolescents begin at those that are 11 and older. So the key point here, in most districts, middle and high school should aim for a starting time of no earlier than 8:30 a.m. Next slide, please. Just some of the factors, limitations, and considerations. The Michigan Department of Education hours of instruction requirement, which did not or does not exist for this school year. So next school year, we're looking at roughly 7 hours or 6 hours and 55 minutes per day that our students will be at the high school. 2021 BHS schedule reminders. This year, our students were able to partake in a reduced schedule. I know for a lot of the students that have reached out to me, that enjoy blackout hour, not just for the support, but some of the other opportunities it provides. Keeping in mind, part of that was because we did not have to meet the requirement of having the 6 hours and 55 minutes per day. Transportation ridership in the routes to meet the demands. Implication for programs such as our students that are deaf and hard of hearing, which pull students from across the county. Sunrise, sunset times to determine the darkness of morning community stops. Traffic considerations at Bloomfield Hills High School. Current peer-reviewed research on school start time impact. Current staff, family, and student input. Current pre- and post-school opportunities such as extra classes, school sanctioned events and teams, and athletic league memberships. Review of start and end times for area high schools. Challenges of the different length of day between elementary, middle, and high school buildings and potential solution. And Mr. Hollerith mentioned this earlier, Bloomfield Hills High School virtual course pilot program for next year. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through several different options and list just some of the pros and cons as a starting point. So currently what we have is high school at 7:25, excuse me, middle school at 8:15, elementary at 9:05. Pros, current system known by the community, allows all middle school and high school athletics and competitive club members to attend competitions with minimal disruption to the school day. Oldest students are at the bus stop during the winter months when it's the darkest. High school can get the Bowers, IA, OTEC before the start of those classes. With offering some optional virtual courses for first and second block at BHS, students could begin in-person instruction at 9:05. Of special note, families will be responsible for getting students to school at a later time. Cons, early start for adolescents. Elementary students start later in the morning, which could cause fatigue later in the day. Next slide, please. What does it look like? A 10-minute shift. High school will start at 7:35, middle school 8:15, elementary at 9:05. Pros, minimal alteration to the schedule, and high school gains 10 extra minutes. See the pros list previously for the current schedule. Some offering optional with offering some virtual courses, first and second block we've talked about. And 10-minute later start for DHH students coming from other Oakland County school districts. It's not a major shift for them as far as getting up a little or starting a little bit later. Cons, early start for adolescents, yet again, elementary students and the potential for fatigue later in the day. Next slide. This slide looks at starting the high school at 7:55, middle school at 8:30, elementary at 9:10. Pros, preferred option for Bloomfield Hills High School students. High school and middle school start later than the previous schedule, with only 20 minutes different at the end of the day, minimal impact to high school after school activities. Does allow for more time in the AM for middle school and high school clubs to meet. Again, looking at the virtual options for even a later start at the high school for that possibility. Cons, specific to middle school, there may be an impact on athletes and competitive clubs leaving early to get to competitions. Elementary students start later in the morning, go later, which may cause fatigue. In the summer, it will be getting dark at the dismissal bus stop or drop off to the latest for their elementary students. And then later drop off at home for DHH students in middle school and elementary, because again, they're coming from throughout the county. Another pro that I'd like to mention is that it would meet the American Academy of Pediatrics guideline for middle school for adolescents at 8:30. A con, it would not meet the American Academy of Pediatrics at the high school level. So it meets one of the two levels as part of the recommendations. Next slide, please. Option, high school starts at 8:30 in the morning. Middle school starts at 9:10 in the morning. Elementary starts at 7:40 in the morning. Pros, it meets the American Academy of Pediatric and CDC recommendations for high school and middle school. Elementary students are in school earlier in the day. Opportunities for morning clubs and activities and sports at middle school and high school. Again, potentially some students have an option to take the online or virtual class, so their day wouldn't start until 10:05 at the high school. Cons, High school and middle school athletics and competitive clubs will need to be dismissed early to get to competitions. Elementary students will be at the bus stop and partial to complete darkness from October through April. Very early and long morning rides for our elementary students that are in our deaf and hard of hearing program. Elementary students that need to be in latchkey will be in the program for 2.5 to 3.5 hours in general, assuming a 5 or 6 o'clock pickup. Then less availability of high school and middle school athletic facilities to the public or later at night due to the later start of school athletic practices. Next slide, please. This has the high school starting at 8:30 a.m. Middle school, 7:40 a.m. Elementary at 9:10. Pros, it meets the American Academy Pediatrics and CDC recommendations for the high school. Opportunities for morning clubs and activities and sports at the high school, offering some virtual classes. So for some students, the day may not begin until 10:05. Cons, it does not meet the American Academy of Pediatrics and Center for Disease Control recommendations for middle school. Again, they recommend that middle school and high school should start at 8:30 or later. High school athletics and competitive clubs will need to be dismissed early to get to competitions. Middle school students will be at the bus stop and partial to complete darkness from October through April. Early and long rides for our middle school DHH students. Middle school students that need to be in latchkey will be in that program again, 2.5 to 3.5 hours, assuming a 5 or 6 o'clock pickup. Less availability of the high school athletic facilities to the public or later at night due to the later start of school athletic practices. Elementary students start later in the morning, go later in the day, which could lead to fatigue. In the summer, it'll be getting dark dismissal as far as our bus drop-offs for our elementary students that get off the latest. Next slide, please. President Colin, I'll turn it over to you for discussion.